Good morning to you. Good afternoon. Good evening. Depending on where you are joining and watching us from. Thank you so much. Here are the latest news headlines from across the continent of Africa. We start with the newspapers from Kenya. The Star newspaper, 61 billion Kenya shillings debt, threatens to derail varsities. Unpaid amount accounts for 15% bills owed by state corporations. The stories on page 4 and 5. Ruto talks tough as Raila threatens mass action. The stories on page 6. And the U.S. First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, she is making her first trip to Kenya tomorrow. While in Kenya, she will meet First Lady Rachel Ruto and other senior officials. That is according to an update from the White House. And widows tell of broken hearts after husbands killed on unsafe roads. And then families in mourning after 3 men killed in Isiolo mine collapse. And the main pictorial there is of President William Ruto, who was inspecting Nairobi River cleanup yesterday. All right. So the Standard newspaper, mass action warning, President Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga lock horns over an opposition call for massive mass action across the country if the cost of living will not have been lowered within 14 days and the reconstitution of IEBC halted to allow for a bipartisan process. We will find that story on page 4. Yes, I committed cyber terrorism, Dusit to suspect, says, and then stand focus in Budapest. Anxiety over varsity college admissions, funding, fee increase plans, and cut-off point determination delay process to admit more than 800,000 candidates who sat last year KCSE examinations. From Lotodo to Kosing, leaders plead innocent. The Daily Nation, MPs fix CBC or go back to 844. The National Assembly and Senate adjourned House business to address the challenges plaguing the new school system, with the recent transition to junior secondary exposing the confusion, unpreparedness, and the big divide between public and private institutions. That story is on page 10. Raila's ultimatum to Ruto, and cheap food lie, the making of a scandal. You'll find that on page 4 and 5. DPP orders probe into sex abuse on tea farms, and governors threatening me, claims controller of budget Dr. Margaret Nyakango, whose office is constitutionally mandated to oversee the expenditure of public funds, yesterday told a House committee county bosses are blocking her bid to access and review key financial records. So that is what we have on the front pages of the leading Kenya's newspapers today. Let's look at some other papers from across the continent, and we head over to Nigeria. The Daily Trust from Nigeria, whose front page looks like a campaign poster. Buhari urges candidates to accept election outcome. I guess Atiku has paid for that. All right, and then the Punch also the front page looking like a campaign poster. INEC distributes election materials as Buhari meets security chiefs. All right, and the Nation also from Nigeria. Why I seek your mandate to be president by Tinubu. Accept results, avoid acrimony, Buhari tells candidates. And then don't vote for them. Please vote for BAT. That's what we're having on the front page of the Nation newspaper. The Daily News from Zimbabwe. ZEC report is still being challenged. Concord case against it by ZANU PF affiliate going ahead. Women avoiding female condoms. That is what we also have there. And then, all right. The news also from Zimbabwe, ED gazetted wrong report, experts claim. Zimbabwe braces for Cyclone Freddy. And then the Daily Monitor from Uganda, minister faces censure over relief iron sheets. And then Kenya to buy huge consignment of Ugandan maize. And then morale high ground at Lent season starts. Okay. The New Times from Rwanda. Rwanda's top women referees right there. And then the Citizen from Tanzania. revealed the factors behind 25% insurance leap and rainy season will be a mixed bag. TMA cautions and UN set to shut down Rwanda tribunal detention facility, and removal of national ID expiry was long overdue. Now that is something I don't understand. I've never had a country in the world where there was you had to keep renewing your national identity card. So apparently Tanzania, that is what was happening. So I think they're trying to remove that. It's quite something. The Daily Telegraph from the UK, warning to hunt of economic cliff edge. And then asylum amnesty to clear backlog of 90,000 claims. And then the Daily Express, Rishi launches crackdown on asylum seeker backlog, and ISIS terror bride Begum banned from returning to Britain. And then the newspaper, nursing union accused of taking King's farthing as strikers split. Okay, whatever that means. The Guardian, also from the UK, alarm over rising tide of toxic forever chemicals. And the Daily Mail, amnesty row over fast track for asylum seekers. And then the Metro sees her salad, the great fruit and vegetable shortage. Okay. And then the Independent, the day that Britain turned into the empty basket case of Europe, UK's bare shelves, a laughing stock as supermarkets ration fruit and vegetables, but it down to Brexit or bad weather in EU. I think now it all adds up now. These are problems you could not hear from Britain when they were part of the European Union. So the questions are being asked there. This current wars that Britain is experiencing, does it have to do with anything, the exit from European Union or Brexit, as it is referred to as? Let's look at some weather conditions. And the latest on that cyclone, authorities in Madagascar have announced that the passage of powerful tropical cyclone Freddy resulted in 4 dead. The storm affected some 16,600 people, according to the country's National Risk Management Office. The powerful gust of wind reached about 130 kilometers per hour, contrary to last year's cyclone. But Cyclone Freddy did not bring as much rain as it was expected. Freddy is the first cyclone and the second tropical weather system to hit Madagascar during the current season, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. After Madagascar, the cyclone is now headed to Mozambique and Zimbabwe on the African mainland. Last year, cyclone Batsirai killed more than 130 people across Madagascar alone. And still on some weather report, people living in areas prone to flooding in Mozambique, southern province of Gaza, will be forcefully be removed amid very heavy rains. The authorities have said a planned release of water from the Masingiri Dam could also result in death, said Provincial Secretary of State Lourenço Lidonde. Gaza is also likely to be affected by Cyclone Freddy, which has caused destruction to the island of Madagascar. And so Mozambique might be forced to relocate some of its residents that are living in these flooded areas called Gaza by force, because some of them are not willing to leave. And another news still on the weather. Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera says a Scottish fund for poor countries hit by climate change should be a prototype for the whole world. The Scottish government announced in 2021 that it will begin funding so-called loss and damage projects after much wrangling. World leaders followed Scotland's lead at last year's UN Climate Summit in Egypt. Mr. Chakwera said the small Scottish fund has already made a significant difference in 10 areas. A quarter of the £2 million allocated for this year is being spent in Malawi, which has long established ties with Scotland. A further £5 million is being made available from April. In an interview with the BBC, President Chakwera said it has made huge difference in the people and their livelihoods because they are given a hand up, so the resilience we talk about becomes a practical issue. He added that Scotland is already doing what everybody else needs to be doing, describing the money as aid is wrong. He insisted, saying it would instead be seen as countries taking responsibility of climate change together. Loss and damage refers to the impacts caused by the climate change, such as increasing storms and more destructive weather patterns. In Malawi's Zomba region, the Scottish government money is being used to rebuild parts of the 7-kilometer flood embankment on the Palombe River, which was breached by storms last year in 10 places farther south. New flood defenses are being built in the village of Mapundungu, where the village was relocated to higher ground to avoid flooding, but was then hit by a deluge of running off the hills. So that is that. Now let's look at some sports news. And the African Games scheduled to take place in Ghana in August have been postponed until next year after an agreement between major stakeholders running the multi-sport competition. Ghana's effort to host the 13th edition have been hampered by an ongoing disagreement over marketing rights, which has delayed the competition of the required facilities. In October 2020, President Akufo-Addo announced plans to construct an Olympic quality stadium at Botiman for the Games. However, those plans were shelved in June 2021, with organizers opting to refurbish the University of Ghana Stadium, which work on the venue now behind schedule. Disruption caused by coronavirus pandemic and rising costs because of high inflation have also been reported as reasons for the delay. Speaking at a press conference held at another host venue, the Accra Sports Stadium chairman of the organizing committee, Dr. Kwako Fusu-Asare, said the games will still be called Accra 2023 as initially planned. The name will be the same. Tokyo 2020 was done in 2021, so we will maintain the same name. On when exactly the event might take place next year, he added, there has not been any definite day, but very soon you will know if it is in 2024. So Ghana there has postponed the African Games that was scheduled to be happening in August of this year because of it's not fully prepared there. So that is the latest there, and you're now up to date. All right, now let's look at some news items that are making headlines. I know I've gone through the headlines, but let's look at some select stories that I'd like for us to talk about this morning, and we start with Guinea. Transitional leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has urged the Constitutional Review Committee to consider the needs and realities of the country and draft a robust new supreme law. The privately owned Africa Guinea website is now reporting. He said, and I'll quote him, "Our country needs tranquility, not just permanent transitional period. So today we're talking about the Constitution. We need to be able to think about putting in strong a constitution adapted to our needs and realities," he said on Tuesday while launching the Constitutional Review Symposium in the capital, Conakry. He warned the committee against drafting a copy and paste or tailor-made constitution for the country. The junta leader said the National Transitional Committee is committed to drafting a new constitution for posterity and not one to suit the interim authorities. Opposition groups and the civil society have called for protests to demand the resignation of the transitional government. The junta has pledged to hand over power to civilian authorities at the end of the 2-year transition period that started in January. Okay. Now, of course, one of the key things that this junta in Guinea said when he came to power, he said he wanted to, if I could just paraphrase what he said, to relook at the foundations of the country, and one of them was to perhaps relook at the country's constitution. So he wanted to relook at the constitution, and from his own perspective, the current constitution that Guinea was using was not alive to the realities of Guinea as it is today, and was not serving the people and the purpose as well as it should. So he said, apart from the many other reasons that made them remove President Alpha Conde, who, by the way, carried out a constitutional coup. Remember, Alpha Conde served for 2 terms. According to the Guinean constitution, he was meant to serve for 2 terms maximum. But he decided to change the constitution and feed his own whatever he wanted to do. So he had a constitutional coup that allowed him to run for a 3rd term. And that 3rd term, he didn't even sit there for 2 years, that necessitated the coup that took place after numerous protests and how, he was leading the country. And of course, there was protest over that, So for Alpha Conde, as much as I'd like to condemn this coup, but to some large extent, I think he brought this to himself. If he had just served the 2 terms, that is constitutional, and then went ahead and served Guinea in other capacities, not necessarily as a president, then perhaps right now he could be enjoying his retirement. But he decided, since he was the best thing that has ever happened to Guinea, and then he would decided that Guineans needed him, so he would stay whether they like it or not. And so he decided to have a constitutional coup, change the constitution to fit him. And I'm sure if this coup had not taken place, not that I'm supporting this coup, if this coup had not taken place, there are also high possibilities towards the end of his 3rd term, he would have maybe mutilated again the constitution also to benefit him, or to make him stay there as long as he wanted to. And it was such a shame, because for the first time when he was being elected, that was the first democratic election that really had happened in Guinea. There had been some others previously that were marked with so many of these other things that resulted in issues. And for the first time, and under that constitution that they had, his being voted into the office brought with it a lot of hope for the people of Guinea. So it was very symbolic, but he didn't care about that. He just poured water on all the hopes and aspirations of the people of Guinea, and he decided he'll stay here as long as he wanted to stay. And so the people had enough of it, and they started protesting and all of these things. And so that resulted to him being removed from office by the military junta. And so one of the key things that Colonel Mamadi Ntumbuya, who led this removal of former President Alpha Conde, he said, we want to, and by the way, I don't know if they still have him under house arrest. The last we checked, that is what was happening. So I don't know if he's out or what is happening with him. I'm not sure. But he said we need to relook at the foundations of this country, and we see the founders of this country, where we set up in a way that catapulted us to move forward as a country, or the foundations of this country were not set up correctly, and one of them being the constitution. So he had promised for the country to look at the new constitution. And as much as I want to sit here and have some confidence based on what he's saying there, when he said our country needs tranquility, I agree with that. And not just permanent transitional periods, because I think of all these countries that have experienced coups, Guinea has been relatively calm since the taking over of the country by this military junta. So maybe there's something there that they're doing that is inspiring some good level of confidence among the people. I don't know, but there has been some protest here and there for people who want the constitution, who want the country to go back to civilian rule. Yes, there has been some push for that, especially in the opposition. The opposition parties there are saying, no, we want the country to go back to a civilian rule. And there was a meeting that they had organized, and the church, I think, and the civil society were left out of that meeting. I was telling you about that meeting. And I think this was the committee that has been set up. That meeting was supposed to be to do with the constitutional review. And I don't know how you intend to have a constitutional review that is not comprehensively representing the different interests in Guinea. A constitution making process is quite tasking, and it requires as much representation as you can get from the different interest groups, from different sectors of the country, from think tanks, from the just the normal citizens, from all sectors, religious leaders, civil rights, leaders, and all that, and you bring them together, and you take their. They give their opinions and they participate in this, and even the people of Guinea have a right to be part of this constitutional making process. So if the opposition is not part of this, opposition groups and civil society who have since called for protest to demand the resignation of the transitional government appears they're not part of this constitutional review committee, and because they're feeling that, first of all, we should not be having a review or a making of a new constitution while we have an army official as a leader of a country. Okay, that is scary. Because because I saw ours when we were in the process of making our 2010 promulgated constitution, and if you could see the events and the robustness of that process at, the Bomas of Kenya, one of the conference centers that we have in this country, and you could see the proceedings of that process and how long it took, and the engagement and all these things. It requires an atmosphere that you don't feel like you're being intimidated, first of all, that allows the different people that are part of that process to engage freely and to give their suggestions freely, and perhaps to even make references from other constitutions that perhaps it could be borrowed from freely. So you need an atmosphere that allows for a free engagement, a free thinking for the betterment of the country, so that you're able to come up with a document that is alive, that serves the people. And I know this is what Antambuya is saying, and he warned the committee against drafting a copy and paste. So he wants a tailor-made constitution for the country. That already sounds like a threat. That's already a threat. So this committee, do you think they will have the freedom to do what they're supposed to be doing? And constitutional making process is a very serious process. Or do you think they will have to be worrying about their safety and see if at all we even make suggestions of something that might not be in line with what the military wants? Now we will have a problem. As it is, he should not even be talking about it. Colonel Mamadi, what do you know about constitutional writing? You're not even a lawyer, I want to believe. So you might not have a deeper understanding about these processes. There are professionals who should take over this process, who perhaps should advise the country about how to go about this process. And the military especially should stay over there and just let the experts do their job while they engage everybody else that is supposed to be engaged. There's a reason why even in some countries, even the forces don't even vote. There's a reason why even the army is not allowed to demonstrate and protest. The army of the country holds a certain position that is paramount, and that's why you don't want to hear the army every now and then out here in the street unnecessarily making statements unnecessarily. This is how they are, and this is what they represent in a country, and they should be left as such and just protect the country against external aggression and just make sure that the country is safe. That is the main work of the army. But when you see an army official, like now the transitional leader, so when he speaks, you assume the whole army of the country is speaking. When he comes out and makes these warnings that sounds to me like threats, then nobody will dare to even suggest anything that they feel might be out of tune with what the army perhaps is seeking to have as part of the new constitution. So I wish he would stay in his place as an army official, because he is a transitional leader, so he should stay at his place and let the people who understand the issue of constitutional making do their job, so that Guinea perhaps can relook at the constitution they had and areas in which that was not serving them well, and that should not be left for the army to decide. There are people who can help in determining some of these things and see how can we well adjust. What are the loopholes that even allowed President Alpha Conde to think that he can have a constitutional coup and that it could be and it was going to be okay? How can we address that? The issue of transition, the issue of leadership. How can we tighten issue around term limits and things like that? So, among other things that I'm sure perhaps Guineans would love to be to have them reviewed in the constitution. So it's a very sacred process, if you ask me, because if you have a constitution that is not alive to the country's wishes and aspirations and needs, and does not fully capture the issues of human rights, and does not fully capture the issues of responsibilities and all that, then now you are creating a problem instead of solving one. And that's why things like this should be devoid of intimidations, should be devoid of too much politicking, should be devoid of unnecessary drama or sideshows or things like that, so that you ensure that you have a proper, because the constitution, that is the contract between the people, the government and the people. So it has to be in such a way that it fosters harmony in a country. It fosters harmony properly, and it captures the aspirations of the people in that country. So with this, what sounds to me as threats, I don't know how that process is going to occur. But I do agree with him on one part, although I don't. When he says the constitution should be tailor-made. Well, when he says tailor-made, I don't agree with that part, but I do agree that it should be a constitution that works for the people of Guinea. So if that is what he's saying, then I agree with him. And also he's saying it should not be copy-paste. Well, we saw our constitution now that we are struggling to perhaps later on there will be some changes. I don't know if this a new administration is interested in that, but we saw President Uhuru Kenyatta, former president, initiating some changes because that is it adjusted, but for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the leaders in charge at that time. For the benefit of the people, and see, is it truly capturing and is it truly addressing the issues that the country would want the constitution to address? So the issue of copy pasting is a huge problem. Our Kenyan constitution is we've borrowed heavily from the US constitution, and also we've borrowed from the UK's constitution, and so it is a merging of these two constitutions. And because our older constitution was heavily came from the UK, our former colonial master, and so we whatever they left, that is what we've been working with, and maybe just reviewing and adjusting here and there. But it's based from what they left us with. So in the 2010 constitution, we borrowed. So it's a hybrid. We borrowed heavily from the U.S. Constitution when it comes to devolution and things like that. And in the U.S. it is states, but here we have the counties, and there we have the Senate, and also here we adopted that. But now we have so many of these positions, and we're using a lot of money to pay these people, and you wonder, do we really need this Senate? which is supposed to be playing the role of oversight, and how well are they, playing this role? And do we even need? There has been conversations, because the new constitution brought with it a lot of positions, elective positions, especially. So there has been debates over that, and if at all it's really necessary. So we borrowed heavily, and we mixed and matched. And so Jambuya is warning the crafters of the Guinean constitution. They're saying you cannot copy and paste. I don't know how he will know. I guess he has his researchers who will be going through and seeing, but he does not understand, because the process of constitutional making and the law itself, you are allowed to even to make reference. Remember when Malawi's president, who came before Chakwera, I'm forgetting his name, who was re-elected, but Chakwera went and Peter Mutharika. Chakwera went and challenged his re-election. It took 1 year, almost 1 year, for the court to rule on this case and found that Peter Mutharika was not duly elected. So the country had to go for another election. And while they were making that ruling, they made reference and they quoted the Kenyan case and the nullification of former President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election. That forced us to go to another election. So in law, you are allowed to quote other jurisprudence. You are allowed to make reference and say in such a case that happened in India or whatever, and that is considered very legal. So as much as you can't copy and paste, but also you're allowed to borrow from other jurisdictions that are perhaps working and that perhaps represent what you intend to achieve and where you intend to go and what you intend to review. So you're allowed to do that. So copy and pasting might not, that might be something that might not be easy to avoid, but you can borrow some ideas and you can borrow from the best practices around the world and see how now do we fit this within our local context in a way that actually it works for us. That is where now the tailor making of this constitution comes in. Okay? All right. Enough of that constitution. Let's look at a Tunisian migration NGO has denounced a speech by President Kais Saied as racist and hateful, in which he maligned sub-Saharan African migrants as a source of violence, crimes, and unacceptable acts. On Tuesday, Saied said called for urgent measures against the migration of sub-Saharan Africans to his country. It's amazing. He's in Africa, right? In the past, some of the migrants reaching Tunisia have been refugees fleeing conflicts including Mali, Cameroon, Burkina Faso. Under international law, it is not illegal to enter a state as a refugee. President Saied described the arrival of hordes of illegal migrants and added that there was a need to quickly put an end to this immigration. He also said it was part of a criminal enterprise hatched at the dawn of his century to change the demographic composition of Tunisia. So he's saying you're taking your black cells to Tunisia and you want to increase your population in Tunisia, and he's saying no, we as Arabs plan to stay this way. So he does not want the demographic composition of Tunisia to be altered in any way. The intention, he claimed, was to transform it into an African-only country and blur its character as an Arab-Muslim one. What? Okay, now this speech, you can see already, if I was a white person, my face could be pink now or purple, I don't know. Now this speech causes, according to this NGO, causes great disappointment and great consternation. Ramadani Ben Amor, the spokesperson of the Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights, told the AFP, "This is racist and hateful speech, marks a sad day. The fact that the president of a country that has signed international conventions on immigration is making such a speech is extremely serious, he said. Mr. Said made the speech during a meeting of the National Security Council devoted to the urgent measures that must be taken to deal with the arrival of in Tunisia of a large number of illegal migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. According to a press release from the presidency on Sunday, the Tunisian Coast Guard announced it had rescued about 423 migrants in a single night off the coast and foiled 16 attempts to illegally immigrate by sea to Europe. Most of these migrants arrived in Tunisia in an attempt to migrate to Europe by sea. Some stretches of the Tunisian coastline are less than 150 kilometers from the Italian island of Lampedusa. That's quite interesting. It's really something there from President Said. It's a racist to the core. What is this? Now, I was hoping that perhaps the presidents of sub-Saharan Africans, South Africa, this is the time where I was expecting for you to stand up and say something. The way you've been against Israel being accorded the observer status in the African Union because of what you term as its apartheid tendencies towards Palestine, and you've taken very strong stand on that, and mostly because they do understand what apartheid did to South Africa, and so you identify with the people of Palestine because you feel the same thing that Israel is doing to them is what the apartheid regime was doing to the black South Africans. And so what do you call this? Why are the leaders from the sub-Saharan Africa not talking? Why are we not saying something? Why are we not protesting? Why are we not writing protest notes? In the diplomacy world, there's what you call protest note. You write and you say, no, I don't agree with that position that your country is taking. I don't agree with what has been said. I don't agree with that action or this and that. So you're allowed to do that without necessarily recalling or doing all those extremes. But you're allowed to say this sentiment by President Kais Saied does not sit well with me as a leader from the sub-Saharan Africa. So he's saying these black Africans have the audacity to think, this is my version, have the audacity to think that they want to come here in Tunisia and they want to corrupt, I think, the Arabness of the Tunisian people and start infiltrating our race. Because that's what he said. I'm not even making this up. Let me read that for you one more time. So he also said it was a part of a criminal enterprise hatched at the dawn of this century to change the demographic composition of Tunisia. So if you want to change the demographic composition of Tunisia, so you think you want to go there and maybe intermarry. You think you want to go there and maybe stay there and start procreating and create your own small black people something in Tunisia and start increasing in changing the demographic composition of the country. That is what he's essentially saying. And he said that the intention, he claimed, was to transform it into an African-only country and blur its character as an Arab Muslim. What century is this person living in? Oh boy. I know it's not funny. I just can't help it. So he's saying these people who are going there, it's like a plan that has been hatched. I guess the leaders from the sub-Saharan Africa have hatched a plan to send their poor people there and they want to transform Tunisia into an African-only country and blur its strong character as an Arab Muslim country. These words are so deep and are so hateful and are so racist. And if any of you still being quiet and say nothing about this, I'm ashamed and appalled. And you should call President Kais Saied out for these utterances. What do you mean they want to transform your country into an African-only country? Are you not in the African continent? Are you not part of the African Union? What are you doing in the African Union? What are you doing? Like, what is wrong with these countries from the Maghreb? You know, the western part of the north part of Africa, together with the, the Arab world in the Middle East. They normally don't consider themselves as part of Africa, all right? And I don't know, maybe this has much to do with these Western powers, because they're the ones who have divided us like this. When they're solving the problems in Tunisia, Morocco, Mauritania, Libya, up there, they don't solve or engage with these countries as part of Africa. Instead, there are issues. In fact, they do have ministries that deal with the Middle East, and these countries are normally lumped up with the Middle East. So you find that the kind of foreign policy they're crafting, the kind of policies they're putting in place to address certain issues, maybe to do with the Middle East, it is extended to these countries, and so that they're sort of detached from the rest of us. And that's why you hear the sub-Saharan Africa and the other countries in the north. So if maybe you and Morocco should consider, I don't know how you're going to do this. Morocco has even proposed building a bridge that will connect it to Spain so that it's considered as being part of the European Union. And now Tunisia, you're worried, these migrants, and I've never read from any place that these migrants actually go and stop over in Tunisia and try to stay there. Tunisia is just a transit route in which they get to Europe. They never stay there for anything, because they also know that they're not wanted there. So they normally make these dangerous journeys through the Mediterranean, and Tunisia happens to be on the way of where they really want to go, so somehow they find themselves just passing through that on their way to wherever they want to go. But I've never heard a case where these migrants actually stay in Tunisia, because that part of the world has not been very kind to the other sons and daughters from this other side of the continent of Africa, which I think is quite sad. So I do understand the differences and the division in how we are, but also for a whole president of a country in Africa to stand and say that these people who are passing through Tunisia to Europe, the intention is like our leaders here, Paul Biya and Buhari, and maybe Abiy and Isaias Afwerki and Sudanese president, and because a lot of these migrants are from these countries, they've probably sat down and decided, you know what, we want you to go and make up a population of more people with some melanin over there in Tunisia. We want to have a population there of black people in Tunisia. That is not the case. That is not the case. And this is not just a Tunisian problem. This is a problem that now we have to deal with. These are just challenges that are brought about by the hard times in this continent and the changing times. And this is very shameful for our leaders to keep seeing our young people dying and even putting their lives at risk while taking these very dangerous journeys with an aim of reaching to the other side of the world, where they think that they will have greener pastures and perhaps their lives will be changed. We have normalized this, and we have been desensitized from this very important issue that now is posing a huge threat. And before you know it, who knows, with this kind of hate and racism, the Tunisian authorities might start being very brutal. They have been in the past, but they might start being extreme and even killing these migrants. So how can we have this as part of the issues that perhaps we should address as leaders, now that Tunisia does not want to be part of the rest of the Africa, as sub-Saharan African leaders. But I was just hoping this is an African problem that perhaps all of us should come and talk about and see how can we address this. Because I think we read this news, sometimes I come here with news and was it earlier in the week, over I don't know how many migrants died whose boat capsized, and the other week and the other week. It has become a norm, so we don't even think about it so much. But we've seen immigration happening even from the Southern Americas, people wanting to get to the US because of the same reasons. And so such sentiments is not helping. And you'll find other radical Tunisians, after hearing this from the president, now they might have need to take action and target these poor people, who might not even be wanting to settle in Tunisia, but may just be passing through to go to wherever that they feel that they want to go. So I think this is something that needs to be talked about, and I'm just hoping that the leaders from the sub-Saharan Africa might want to add a voice to this and say no. As much as we do understand what challenge this is posing to your country, and perhaps what challenge it is posing as far as your security is concerned, but also this is not how to talk about this issue. This is not how to make a targeted remarks on your fellow Africans. Well, he said he's not. He's not. He's an Arab Muslim. Got nothing to do with you black people. But I'm just saying, they need to stand up and speak and condemn these sentiments that might incite a few radicals up there that may now be waiting for these migrants and causing harm. Just cooperate with these countries, President Said, and then when the authorities from Tunisia perhaps get a hold of some of this, I'm sure they have their passports, I'm sure they know where they're coming from, you send them back. But unfortunately you can't do that, because according to the UN Charter on Refugees, which you are a signatory to, you're not allowed to target or to turn back a refugee who is running away from persecution, is running away from certain conditions in their countries, and they've found their way into your country. You're not allowed to turn back. So if this is such a problem to you, then you might need to get yourself out of these charters that you have ratified at the United Nations. You need to do that. Otherwise, your country has a responsibility to make sure that these Africans, as you call them, are protected, even as they transit. And if that is such a huge problem, then you send them back to their countries, but you're not allowed. You're not allowed, according to the United Nations, you're not allowed to take back people who are fleeing from conflicts, and they're coming from countries like Mali, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, and others. You're not allowed to send them back. So I think that is quite sad. There are these sentiments by President Kais Saied. Quite sad there. I don't like that at all. Anyway, the US First Lady, Jill Biden, arrived in Namibia on Wednesday as part of a 5-day trip to Africa that will also include a visit to Kenya. She is expected to promote the empowerment of Africa's women and its youth, as well as the hunger ravaging the drought-prone Horn of Africa region. Why is the U.S. First Lady coming to Africa to address the issue of hunger and drought? Oh, I forgot. This could be part of the help that they offer to give over the 50 billion, that was promised to Africa. So the U.S. identified a few sectors that they intend to use this money. So this could be it. But why is it the U.S.'s responsibility to to come here and try to find a solution for our hunger and drought. While our armed forces are sitting, I don't want them leading the country, but I'd like for them to go help in digging boreholes. We have very qualified people in our national armies, I believe, spread out across Africa. So if we engage them, not in politics, but if we engage them in ways that are of nation building, like things like I've always insisted, boreholes and things like that, you will be surprised what the army can do in helping to transform our countries across Africa. Because the thing with the army is they do what you've asked them to do. They're very disciplined, and they will deliver. They will deliver. So in such sensitive things and issues, I think we might want to engage our armies. We might want to engage them so that they're able to help with these national matters. And it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't want Jill Biden to come here. She's coming here tomorrow. I don't want her to come here and start taking trips to, I don't know if she will, go to Ghana or whatever. That should be our look here, that should be our problem to solve. And as a country, we are the ones who are supposed to have the strategies and modalities by which we plan to solve these problems. She will come, she'll have a photo opportunity with destitute people from these areas or whatever. It will make for a good photo session, and then she'll go back. Maybe they might give a bit of help, but it's not a solution for a long term. So we need to devise ways in which we are able to address these issues on ourselves in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is a long term, with an aim of solving this problem once and for all. So for her to come to promote the empowerment of Africa's women, and its youth, as well as the hunger ravaging and drought-prone Horn of Africa region, I have a problem with that. And something else I have a problem with, there were dancers representing Namibia's different ethnic groups, some wearing red, and I saw those photos, white and blue, others dressed in bright pink, that greeted her, and they were dancing and singing. I like to see such dancers and such singers dancing for my president when he visits the US next time. You will never see them engaging with this kind of buffoonery. But we have no value. We've placed no premium at all on ourselves. Okay, give her flowers, that's enough. Why do you have to have your children line up and do all these things? I know Africans, we are very cordial in our culture, and that's how we welcome our guests and all that. But no, I've never seen anybody dance for my president, the current or the previous one or the other one or the other one. I've never seen the kids from the US being removed from their schools to come and receive a visiting head of state. It's not even part of their diplomatic protocol. Why do we do that here? This is some of the things we need to stop so that these people can take us seriously. She and Monica Geingob, Namibia's first lady, embraced on the tarmac before Jill Biden greeted US and Namibian diplomat and government officials. She's accompanied by her granddaughter, Naomi Biden. You're also dancing for Naomi Biden. Get out of here. I just don't get it. So she's coming here tomorrow, so I'll be watching to see how we intend to receive her. I will not be surprised to see dancers there. Doesn't make sense, but we need to change our ways. If we need to be taken seriously out there, it's just out of order. If that's not what they do to you, if that's not how they receive you there, then you also need to adjust. You need to adjust. Flowers is enough, and make sure she's safe. That's it. All this dancing and all this, nah, it's not necessary. Okay. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you later on at 3 p.m. East African time with more news from the continent of Africa, and I'll also be bringing you up to date with the latest preparations and what is happening in Nigeria as far as the countdown towards the elections on Saturday is concerned. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.